Well, hello again. Now, this chap is a journalist. He's an Australian journalist. He's got an interest in UFOs. He's written a book about UFOs, and he's telling some rather tall tales to get people interested in his book. And I'll demonstrate exactly what I mean by this. Now, this video is from Spanian. I'll leave a link to this video below so you can watch it in its entirety. So credit to Spanian for the clips that I'm going to comment on. Right, let's hear what Mr. Coulthart has to say.
This is the big moment.
Yeah.
So in 2004, you've got a carrier battle group. You've got a gigantic aircraft carrier, the USS Nimitz, one of the biggest aircraft carriers in the US. Mm-hmm. And they always travel with multiple other vessels around them. And so they have destroyers and cruisers and other battleships around them that protect them. And they were doing rehearsals for the Gulf War. And in the course of those rehearsals, they were off the coast of California, off Baja, California, Mexico. Yep. And the radar operators on the USS Princeton, which was one of the vessels as part of this carrier battle group.
Now, this is the first thing, the radar operators. Now, so far we're only aware of one radar operator that's told the story, and that was Kevin Day. And he was the subject of, or his story was the subject of a video that I did a little while ago, the video that I posted previous to this one. So there's the first embellishment, radar operators. We're only aware of one radar operator that tells this story.
They were seeing these objects up in the atmosphere on their radar at 80,000 feet. Mm-hmm. And the really strange thing is, we don't have a lot of aircraft that can just hover at 80,000 feet.
Or even get there.
So there's the second embellishment. They're seeing these aircraft at 80,000 feet, and we don't have any aircraft that can hover at that altitude. Now, Kevin Day tells us, he was the radar operator on the Princeton that's telling this story, there were 5 to 10 objects at 28,000 feet, and they were travelling at 100 knots. So I don't know where the investigative journalism comes into this. This is embellished beyond reason. There's no critical thinking here whatsoever. So I'll just play a little bit more of this.
Yeah, if we can get there, yeah. And they were watching, there were hundreds of these objects
There were hundreds of these objects.
Hovering.
Yeah. Just hovering. And the real story is there was 5 to 10 objects travelling at 100 knots. I'll just show you a clip from Kevin Day, the radar operator on the Princeton at the time, the only one that's come forward so far, who's will show us precisely how much embellishment Mr. Coulthart is putting into this story. So this is Kevin Day. He's the only radar operator from the Princeton to come forward and tell the first-hand story of this UFO encounter from 2004. Now he's going to describe what he saw on his radar.
Yeah, I was on watch. I was actually sitting anti-air warfare coordinator, AAWC, what we called it, and we were probably 100 miles. I forget how far exactly that day we were off the coast of San Diego southwest, kind of off the coast of Mexico, Baja, and I started to notice these weird tracks that were popping onto my radar coverage right around San Clemente Island. And the reason why I say they were weird because they were appearing in groups of 5 to 10 at a time, and
5 to 10 at a time, so certainly not hundreds, as Mr. Coulthart tells us.
They were pretty closely spaced to each other, and they were 28,000 feet going 100 knots tracking south.
So they're at 28,000 feet travelling at 100 knots tracking south, not at 80,000 feet and hovering, so stationary at 80,000 feet, which is what Mr. Coulthart is telling us. There's serious embellishments in this UFO business. There's an awful lot of people get into this UFO business, and as soon they get swept up in it, you know, until 5 to 10 unidentified objects becomes hundreds. 28,000 feet becomes 80,000 feet. You know, them travelling at 100 knots becomes they're stationary and hovering. You know, it's just nonsense. The more I look into this UFO ET business, the less I find. Okay, let's go back and see what else Mr. Coulthart has to say. So here we are, back with Mr. Coulthart.
And they were monitoring them, but they couldn't do much about it. But they knew they had a carrier battle group exercise coming up where they were going to be flying aircraft. And so if those things came down into the zone where they were going to be operating, it was an emergency. It was a really big issue because they had jets, fighter jets, flying at high supersonic speeds. And so they had to know what they were.
They had fighter jets flying at high supersonic speeds. So they had to know what they were. Now, military jets very rarely fly at supersonic speeds. It's very expensive, and we can actually see some evidence to show that they were certainly not flying at supersonic speeds. So we'll just take a quick look at that. This is another gross embellishment by Ross Coulthart. They were flying at high supersonic speeds. Okay, let's just have a look at one of the videos released by the American, either the Pentagon or, you know, some sort of official video release anyway. And we can see from the head-up display on one of the fighter jets that was involved in chasing the Tic Tac how fast the jet was actually going. Okay, so this is from one of the videos released by the Pentagon, the Tic Tac video. Now, Mr. Coulthart tells us these planes are travelling at high supersonic speeds, so you could get low supersonic speeds. If we actually look at the head-up display on the F-18, I think this is Chad Underwood's plane. The Tic Tac video comes from. So we can see that the target, it's looking at the target, and it's 58 degrees to the left. The look down angle is 36 degrees. The altitude is 25,000 feet, 25,010 feet. We can use these numbers to do a little bit of trigonometry to show that the and the range is 3.3 nautical miles. So we can use those numbers to do a little bit of trigonometry to show that this is actually at 13,800 feet. You can try it yourself if you did trigonometry at school. You could just do what I did, you know, just look it up, refresh your memory, and you know, just do that simple bit of trigonometry, and it will show you that that Tic Tac is at 13,800 feet. And if you could be further bothered, you can calculate how far the aircraft tracks over the length of the clip, because we have here, down here, the speed. There's the speed, 259 knots. 259 knots. Nowhere near supersonic. At 25,000 feet, to be supersonic, he would have to be doing at least 602 knots. So this is less than half of the supersonic speed, 259 knots. Okay, so another significant embellishment. And I have to keep asking myself why. Why all these, if this is true, this is all real, you know, why all these embellishments? Okay, let's get back to Mr. Coulthart.
And so on the day of the major exercise, all of a sudden these objects just suddenly went, dropped down to 28,000 feet.
He's telling this story like he was there, isn't he? Now bear in mind that Kevin Day, the radar operator, has never said he's seen anything at 80,000 feet. He always tells the story at 28,000 feet, okay? So this 80,000 feet, goodness knows where he's got that from. And suddenly they've gone bump down to 28,000 feet. So, well, at least he's got something right. You know, they were seen at 28,000 feet. Actually, on the previous video, I said these objects aren't going to be real. It's going to be a software glitch, and explained why I thought that was the case. The systems on the Princeton had a top secret upgrade. None of the personnel involved knew that this top secret upgrade had taken place. It must have been a software upgrade. The Hawkeye that Kevin Day talked to, which is an airborne radar platform, could not see the objects, and I think that's because the Hawkeye didn't have a systems upgrade. It had a different type of radar. Because these objects were not physically real, the radar aircraft couldn't see them, and Kevin Day on the Princeton could see them because it was a software glitch. And he said before it had this top secret upgrade, they were completely unaware of these objects. So they're not objects. They don't exist in the real world. Only in the radar software. So the Princeton has got phased array radar, which is not a spinning radar. So if you look at it, picture of the Princeton, it's got 4 panels on it, one forward, one aft, one port, one starboard, and the computer software stitches the 360-degree picture together. The beam is actually scanned by phasing the antennas. There's no physically moving antennas, and the software in the computer stitches it all together. And I think it's pretty obvious this was a software glitch. Anyway, let's continue with Mr. Coulthart's serious embellishment of the story.
In one case, they dropped down to the surface of the ocean. And they could see this on these radar systems.
Just like that, dropped?
Not just dropped like...
Radar system, I've only heard it being reported from the radar on the Princeton.
Slowly.
But
this was instantaneous
Certainly the pilots would not have been able to see that.
acceleration.
No way.
And so they've estimated, scientists have estimated how fast these objects moved. And one of the estimations is that if, as appears to be the case, they didn't slow down to decelerate, they literally went poof, and literally moved to another part of the sky instantaneously.
Well, is it another part of the sky, or is it down to the surface of the ocean? Kevin Day said they dropped in an instant to the surface of the ocean from 28,000 feet.
They estimate it was 500,000 kilometres an hour in speed.
Yeah.
Completely impossible speeds. I think it was 12,000 Mach was a more conservative
So a
estimate.
dead stop. Imagine the G-force in that.
Well, it would turn you and me into pea soup.
I think pea soup's probably what Mr. Coulthart has between his ears, to be perfectly honest. This is not going to be a real physical object. This is going to be a software glitch. It's physically impossible. So it's going to be a software glitch after this top secret upgrade that none of them were aware of.
See it.
So they realised they had something unusual. So they sent a pilot to go out and investigate.
Yeah.
And on the F-18 jets that they've got these fantastic new forward-looking infrared imaging systems, beautiful optics, so that they can see what's ahead of them. And they're 20 or 30 miles out, and they pick up this object that's just hovering.
Well, they're not actually beautiful optics if it's infrared. We don't actually see an optical image of the thing. We only see what it looks like in the infrared spectrum. So that again is not technically correct.
The sky. Now the cool thing about modern propulsion systems is that when you've got, say, a jet flying along in the sky, it's got engines, it's got a heat source, and so on a forward-looking infrared, it glows with the heat.
Yep.
And if you're a pilot, that's what you're looking for. You're looking for what kind of propulsion system it was. And the really interesting thing is they couldn't see any energy.
Really?
It was almost the ambient temperature of the atmosphere.
because it was a lighter than air vehicle. Yeah. Okay. All right. I think we'll move on a little bit from that. Okay. Back with Mr. Coulthart.
And so You know, I don't mind that.
Yeah.
But the idea, I don't buy into conspiracy theories a lot at all,
Yeah.
which is what...
Which is it's extreme. It's very hard to believe after all the embellishments I've heard with regard to the Tic Tac story just in the last 10 minutes.
This whole UFO story is fascinating to me because I went into it thinking I'm pretty quickly going to be able to disprove this UFO stuff. You know, I'll be able to knock it off in 6 months. I'll do a film about it for 60 minutes or one of the shows, and it'll be fun. We'll be able to debunk UFOs.
A bit like Flat Earth.
Yeah. And I went into it thinking with that attitude that I'll be intensely sceptical. And I can remember I was over in Washington, D.C.
Well, he certainly hasn't done very much in the way of research, has he? You know, because if he went in there thinking he's going to be able to debunk it, it'd be very, very easy to debunk just with the information so far in this video. But he's made no effort to debunk it. He's swallowing all this stuff, hook, line and sinker, expanding on it and embellishing it into something it really isn't. And I think this has probably got something to do with his book, to be perfectly honest. Call me a cynic, but that's what I think it's all about. And a lot of people, as I said earlier, they get caught up in this UFO business. They're enthusiastic about it, and you know they just run with it, and their critical thinking ability goes out the window.
For 60 minutes, and a friend of mine in the Defence Department here in Australia had told me to go and talk to a particular guy, and he was in the US Air Force, and he agreed to meet me in Washington DC in a bar in Georgetown at about 7:30 at night. And so we're sitting like this across the table, and I go, look, I'm thinking about writing a book about UFOs. And he's really serious with me, and I say, what do you think about that? And he goes, it's a really good idea. And then I realise he's actually quite solemn, he's quite serious. And I go, well, what's your position on UFOs? And he said, oh, they're indisputably real. I said, what do you mean? I said, I accept that there are things that we can't recognise in the sky, but you know, you're not talking about little green men, are you? And he goes, I don't know what they are. But he said, whatever they are, they're intelligent, they're light years ahead of us in technology, and we've got thousands and thousands of reports about them that we've been covering up for years.
Yeah, and again, there's no evidence of this, you know, because he's in the government. Even if this story is even true at all, that would be enthusiastic about the subject. He may have heard, you know, dribs and drabs of stuff and just formed an opinion, but there is no evidence of ET visitation. You know, if you start saying things like the technology is light years ahead of us, it's giving the impression that it's aliens, isn't it? Whereas a lot of it could be, you know, system malfunctions. I mean, he was talking earlier about the Malmstrom incident, where supposedly a UFO shut down a lot of nuclear missiles in America. But there was maintenance going on at the base at the time. You know, you would think a top secret base like that might have closed circuit television, and there might be some images of this thing, but no, there's no images. It's just a story. And if someone did make some sort of monumental cock up, which powered all these missiles down, they're not going to admit it, are they?
And I went about. What do you reckon that's about? Like, why are they doing that? Because I question, like, and you gave me some insight into it before. Now with that footage being released, they're in a position where they have to. But I was always, I'm the opposite. Like of hey, like after 36 years, I've come to the position that if the government tell me the sky's blue, I will start that it's red. Until no, that's how I am with every single thing. And that's like, like if they say it's blue, I'll be like, all right, it's red. But like
my current theory is this, and as I'm telling you this, I've been given this idea by a lot of people I've spoken to. This is kind of a coalescence of what I've concluded for the moment. It's my current state of the situation.
Where you're at,
I'm in no doubt whatsoever that there is an intelligent phenomenon. It's an intelligence of some kind It may be future human. It may be us from the future.
Yeah.
It could be extraterrestrial. I don't know.
Yeah.
It could be
live amongst us.
Exactly.
Could be something living amongst us.
Well, I think there's evidence to suggest that it is.
Yeah.
It could be interdimensional.
Well, why don't you present that evidence, Mr. Coulthart? Let's see what evidence you can produce to show us what brings you to the conclusion that a possible ET extraterrestrials are possibly living amongst us. I would love to see that.
You know how people say that we live in a multi-dimensional universe? But one of the terms that has been coined by the experts, there's a guy called Lou Elizondo who's become a friend of mine.
Yeah.
And when the New York Times did the big expose in 2017, December 15th, 2017, about the Tic Tac video and then the gimbal video. Oh, and by the way, the video from the USS Theodore Roosevelt.
Yeah, we didn't get into that.
Yeah, that was really cool.
Yeah.
Because what you see on that, and I've spoken to people who've seen the whole video,
Yeah.
and the cool thing is they've got it on an at FLIR again, a forward-looking infrared,
Yeah.
and it's literally an object, and it's in hover, and there's no heat source.
Yeah.
So there's no engines holding it up.
Yeah.
Like, for something to hover,
Are these windowless? Is it?
sometimes they've been seen to have windows,
Oh, yeah.
but often they're just like a hovering.
Yeah, he was. He's been talking to Lou Elizondo, who's become a friend of his. Now, you've got to bear in mind that Lou Elizondo was, he left this Pentagon UFO program to go and work for the TTSA, the To the Stars Academy, with Tom DeLonge and a couple of other people. And these people really are not well known for integrity in the UFO business.
Tube or a hovering lenticular disc.
Yep.
And they see it swivels like this.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why they call it the gimbal, because it literally rotates on a gimbal.
Like a gimbal, yeah.
And some people have tried to suggest it was just a distant jet turning, and that's
spot.
Yeah, exactly. But all of the analysis now shows that doesn't explain this.
Yeah.
And there was another one called the.
Actually, that gimbal video does look a lot like a twin-engine jet in infrared, just rotating through, 45 degrees or whatever. It certainly doesn't look huge. There's no range on it either. If you look at the head-up display on the F-18, I might actually show a bit of that clip if I can find it. But first of all, let's just see what else he's got to say.
Go fast, where you see a little orb object scooting across the surface of the ocean really, really fast.
And that's what I showed earlier, and that's not what we see at all. It's not scooting across the surface of the ocean really, really fast. It's again, if you look at the numbers on the head-up display, you can do a bit of trigonometry, and you can clearly see it's at 13,800 feet, and it's hardly moving. So, how much, this guy calls himself an investigative journalist, but he seems completely devoid of critical thinking. If he can't do something as simple as that, look at some actual evidence, which is the numbers on the head-up display of the aircraft that's locked onto this little tic-tac. Use those numbers to do a simple bit of trigonometry to show what the altitude of the thing is. How much credibility can we say? What does that say for this guy's credibility? I think personally it says he has none.
Now, what happened was, when the New York Times ran these videos in 2017 and eventually right through to 2020, they were leaking a lot of information that had been leaked to them from inside the US Defense Department. A guy came forward called Lou Elizondo, and it turned out he was a former counterintelligence agent working for the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense Intelligence. He was a spy working for the US.
You're good at remembering these labels.
Yeah. He was a spy working for the US Defense Department.
Yeah.
And he was hired secretly to investigate UFOs.
Yeah.
And it turned out that between 2007, 2008 and 2012, the US did a secret investigation into UFOs.
Yeah.
And he led that program.
Well, you'd have to wonder why this was, because the Princeton, excuse me, the Princeton Tic Tac Nimitz, the Princeton Nimitz Tic Tac incident was in 2004. So why did they leave it for 5, 6, 7 years before they actually started investigating this sort of stuff?
Now, he's told me in interview that he thinks whatever it is a technology. Yeah. And he uses words like craft, vehicle. But he coined a term called the 5 observables, and it's a really useful way of distinguishing these weird objects from other.
And again, he thinks, now Lou Elizondo thinks it's technological. Now, if he was running the UFO program and he was investigating all this stuff and there was anything to it, he would know that it was an ET technology, wouldn't it? He wouldn't think it. He wouldn't believe it. He would know it. So Lou Elizondo doesn't know, and he was running the UFO program. There is no physical evidence. There's no tangible evidence. This is just UFO enthusiasts embellishing.
Other things. They all are capable of instantaneous acceleration, just like that.
We've never seen that on any of the videos, on any of the radar tracks. we never see them doing anything spectacular or unusual.
Tic-tac. They don't have to wind up to go from 0 to 20,000 miles an hour. They can literally go from 0 standing to 20,000 miles an hour in, well, one guy said it was the blink of an eye, 0.7.
Yeah, but again, there's no evidence to support this. This is just stories.
8 of a second. Yeah. They can do hypersonic speeds like 10, 20, 30, 300,000 kilometres an hour. Yeah. Incredible, impossible speeds.
Yeah. Again, where's the evidence to support that? That's an extraordinary claim. Where is the extraordinary evidence? This is just more science fiction stories.
For us, yeah.
They're capable of trans-medium travel, and this is the really interesting thing, that they can go through the atmosphere and then hit the water, and they displace the water so quickly, it's like they're not even hitting the water.
Yeah, the video that I saw of that they claim is a transmedium craft going from the air into the sea, actually looks like the sun setting to me. It's another infrared video. What we don't see is a radar tracks of something going fast, entering the water, and then the track continuing on sonar. Don't see any of that. Zero evidence to support any of this.
If you and I were in an aircraft and we flew towards water, we'd crash in like cement.
So the water makes way for it.
The water is almost displaced by these objects, and they've been measured by submarines and by sonar from ships travelling at 500 knots.
We don't see any evidence of that though. This is just stuff that he's been told, isn't it? I mean, I have not seen any evidence of that. I believe the Russians have an underwater weapon called a Sval that can do 350 knots underwater, something like that. It's a rocket-propelled, supercavitating rocket-propelled torpedo. So 350 knots is probably going to be about 400 miles an hour. It may be that something like that has been tracked, but we're certainly not seeing any evidence of this.
Underwater. In some cases, supersonic speeds underwater.
Like that resistance is crazy.
Impossible. Yeah, impossible.
Impossible. Precisely, Mr. Coulthart, it's impossible. So if you're going to make a claim like that, show us some evidence to support what you're saying. Otherwise we're going to think you're making up a load of stuff, or you're repeating a lot of science fiction stories as truth just to flog a few books.
So the other thing they do is positive lift, and essentially that means they're sitting in the sky for no apparent reason. Like, you know, for you and I to hold a plane in the air, we've got to have gigantic Rolls-Royce engines or Stratton engines, and they're basically holding that aircraft up, or rocket engines.
Pratt and Whitney engines, maybe. Rocket engines, yeah. Yeah, okay. Well, this is getting a bit tedious, to be honest. This is just the same old nonsense over and over again.
Like Elon Musk's SpaceX. Yeah. For some reason, these things are able to hold themselves in the sky in ways that are, to quote Elizondo, breakthrough technology. Yeah. So Lou became a whistleblower. He's stuck his neck out. He's gone public and said, I'm quitting the Defence Department.
So he's discovered this stuff as part of an investigator for the government.
Sure.
And he's now coming out and yeah.
Some people speculate that he's still secretly working for the government. And, you know, who knows, that may be the case. But the interesting thing is that we're now going through a process of kind of begrudging...
Yeah, it's a shame that this fellow interrupted him then.
...admission by the government that, yeah, okay, we've known about these things for years.
Yeah.
And so what happened was, there's a guy who I also know called Chris Mellon, who's a former very senior bureaucrat.
Another UFO enthusiast.
In the US Department of Defense.
Yeah.
And the really interesting thing about Mellon is he's from the really rich Mellon family who own a huge chunk of the American oil business, and like them.
What exactly has that got to do with ET visiting the Earth?
Worth billions. But he's committed himself to public life, and one of the things he's committed himself to is cracking open the truth about UAPs, because he's flatly of the belief that the United States government is concealing stuff that it should be revealing.
Okay, so he's in this senior position. He's from a very wealthy family. He could certainly buy any kind of information that he wanted, I would think, and he's committed. He's committed to finding out the truth about UFOs because he believes. He doesn't know. Now he would be in a position to know, wouldn't he? But he believes.
And he was the guy who helped the New York Times tell the stories about the Tic Tac, the gimbal and the Go Fast, the various objects that were filmed on video. Now,
so if Mellon only believes and Elizondo only believes, neither of them know, it's not happening, is it? It means we don't have any recovered alien spacecraft. We don't have any recovered alien biology.
Both Elizondo and Mellon lobbied the Congress. They went to individual Republican and Democrat senators and congressmen.
I mean, if Elizondo is the head of the UFO research program and he doesn't know, that tells us all we need to know, surely, doesn't it?
And they pushed them to make a requirement in the law saying, you don't get any defence funding unless you tell us the truth about UAPs.
I love that.
Yeah, it's cool. It's absolutely amazing because the interesting thing is, as I discovered when I went to the States, I was very privileged. I was able to go a lot to the United States for my job, and so I'd go and meet congressmen and I'd talk to spies and soldiers, and often a lot of it was off the record, but it was very helpful because it made me realise...
Like you would have talked to, like, looking back, craziest people, eh?
Mate, I've had some amazing conversations. I feel very privileged. And as a journalist, I'm actually kind of laughing because a lot of my colleagues in the media still take the piss with me, and they say, oh, Roscoe, you're interested in UFOs. And I go, yeah, I am. They're real. And they go, ha, ha, ha. And it's funny because as of June the 25th last year, the first report came in from what's called the UAP task force.
I don't think there's much point continuing with that because the report did come in, and I've done a video on that, and they said that there was no evidence of ET visitation. But yeah, I can understand why his colleagues would take the piss out of him. Not so much because he's interested in the subject, but because if he sits in the canteen and he embellishes all the UFO stories like we've seen him embellish today, then you know that they're going to think he's got zero credibility. They're going to say, you know, oh yeah, I really wouldn't. You know, if Ross Coulthart says that, put a line through it. It's going to be bullshit. Okay, well let's just have a very quick look at that video that he was talking about where the thing's on end and it's yeah, standing on end or something. The way he described it sounded like a bit of a clip out of a science fiction film. Let's have a look at the actual clip. Okay, well here is the one that he's calling gimbal. And there it is on the infrared, and we can see how fast the aircraft's going, 242 knots down there. We can see there is no range indication, so it's at a reasonable distance, and if you look at it, it's moving very much like an aircraft would. It's not doing anything spectacular, is it? So, you know, they're keeping up with it, and it's moving very much like an aircraft would. You know, if it's sort of turning a bit to the left and it's turning a little bit to the right. Let's run that again, I think. Let's run that again. Okay, so we can see the bearing up the top there to the target. It's to the left, 37 degrees. Look down angle is 2 degrees, so it's more or less the same altitude. We can see the aircraft is in a left-hand bank. So it looks like the object in front is also in a left-hand bank. It's just sort of straightening up a little bit, but it's certainly not. It's not doing anything unusual, is it? You know, I mean, what is unusual at that? Again, we're at 25,000 feet. It's certainly not as Ross Coulthart described, is it? This big huge thing goes from horizontal to vertical, and it just looks to me like a manoeuvring aircraft. You're looking at the heat from the jet exhaust on a manoeuvring aircraft. I don't think there's anything unusual about that at all. Okay, I think this is worth a look.
So what I did was I wrote letters, good old-fashioned snail mail letters, and I put stamps on them and posted them, and I sent one off to Nat. And he lived in Baltimore, in the east coast of the USA. And I honestly didn't expect to get letters back.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden one day my phone rang. And he was calling me on an encrypted app called Signal.
Yeah.
So he knew he was calling me on a confidential protected communication system.
Yeah.
And he went, "Is that Ross?" And I went, yeah. I went, "Oh heavens, is that Nat Koberts?"
Yeah.
And this is a guy who did all the research and development for the US Navy for about 30 years.
No way.
He designed all their secret boats, and he even designed bits of spacecraft for the Apollo missions and things like that.
Can't say I've heard of this guy. I suspect this is probably an embellishment. I mean, we had one guy designing all the secret boats for the Navy. Designing boats and designing spacecraft, that's a bit of a leap. But maybe I'll Google this guy and see what he actually did, but let's continue.
Anyway, we got to know each other, and sadly he was dying. He was dying from cancer.
Yeah.
And after we built up a bit of a friendship, after a month or so, he said, "Look, I know you're writing a book on UFOs. Why don't you ask me the question?" And so I asked him the question. And what I asked him about was claims that there have been crash retrievals.
Yeah.
That there have been recovered technology, that the US has recovered technology. And before I tell you what he told me...
And of course he doesn't tell him that there has been.
I'll tell you that the official position of the US government from the Obama White House when they responded to a petition asking for them to be transparent about this is denial.
Okay.
They have categorically denied that they are in possession of recovered technology.
Yeah.
And there was a similar qualified denial to the Congress when they held a public hearing, just last week into UFOs. Nat Koberts, though, knowing he was about to die, and he died about 2 months after I interviewed him, I said, "Nat, are you aware, were you ever read into, were you ever briefed about a crash retrieval program for UFOs, UAPs?"
I'm getting goosebumps. Yeah, I'm getting goosebumps.
Oh man, I was.
Yeah.
I really was. And there's this pause.
Yeah.
and I'm thinking, oh, he's going to get annoyed with me, you know,
Yeah.
because you know when
You're
you're
asking a stupid question.
yeah, it's
and
like,
blah, blah, blah,
you know, I was almost embarrassed to ask the question. And there's this really long pause, like you could hear a pin drop, and I can just hear the sizzle, the Trans-Pacific sizzle on the step.
You don't get that with the modern fibre optic links either. Wouldn't have been on a satellite.
And then he goes, yes,
No way.
but I was never read out of it, so there's not much I can tell you.
No way.
Now, being
Yeah, so there you go. So he's not telling us. So when he asked him the question directly about whether there was recovered alien material, he's not telling us what the guy's answer was, because I suspect the guy's answer was no. You know, that we've never recovered anything. He asked him another question: were you ever read into a UFO recovery program meeting? And he said yes. His reply was yes. Now that is completely different to actually recovering any ET material. Having a plan, if you like, to recover ET material, should it fall on the Earth. I don't think it ever would, to be perfectly honest. I think the technology will be such that no ET craft is going to come here and crash. It's going to be made of stuff we can't even imagine, you know, super exotic, low mass synthetic materials we can't even imagine. It's going to be self-healing, there'll be backup systems. There's no way one of those is going to come here and crash. It's just not going to happen. So, but he's saying yes, he was read into a program. So they got a program so that if it did happen, they would have a plan to deal with it. That is very, very different from them actually executing that plan to recover some ET material.
read into a program like that, they have these things in America for secrets. They're called special acts.
Yeah, I don't think it's worth commenting on the next bit. I mean, you know, it's going to tell us how they compartmentalise information. That's not really significant.
Called a secure information facility, compartmentalised information facility, and they literally put a bit of paper in front of you and you read it, and it tells you all the secret. And so he was read into a crash retrieval program. Now, Nat is brilliant, or was a brilliant man, and he's a patriot. He loved his country, indisputably cared passionately about America. He acknowledged to me that he could see no good reason why the public couldn't know what he was telling me. Now
Yeah, but all he's told him, according to Mr. Coulthart himself, is that he was read into a crash retrieval program, an ET craft crash retrieval program. Not that that program was ever put into effect, not that any ET material was ever recovered. So of course he's going to say it doesn't really matter if the public know that. Well, why would it matter? I'm sure the UK's probably got a similar plan. You know, most countries would probably have a similar plan. It will be just something that comes up in these sort of meetings. You know, while, you know, we don't know what it is, you know, we get plenty of sightings, so why don't we actually formulate a plan so if one of these things did fall to Earth, and certainly if one did, the Americans are going to want to capture it for the technology, and if it fell in Australia, the Americans would come here and take it, you know. That's what would happen in the real world, but it's never happened. It's never likely to happen.
You asked me at the beginning of this conversation, why are they keeping it secret? And I think about this often. And
what are they keeping secret? They're keeping secret that they've got a program to recover ET material, not that they have recovered any ET material. Yeah, I don't think this is worth continuing much more with. I'll just have a quick look. Okay, I should have let this play on, because it does. Actually, I'll let you listen to it.
Why the public couldn't know what he was telling me. Now, you asked me at the beginning of this conversation, why are they keeping it secret? And I think about this often. And I think the best explanation is what he told me, that they have recovered technology. He told me that they have recovered craft, spacecraft.
Okay, now that's not what he said a minute ago, is it? He said why didn't he lead with that? Why would you leave the juiciest bit to the end? Initially, he said all he told him was that this guy had been read into a crash retrieval program. He didn't say anything about them actually retrieving spacecraft. Now suddenly they're retrieving spacecraft. Now this fellow that he's talking about is dead. So really Mr. Coulthart could embellish this as much as he likes, because he knows there'd be no comeback from it. There can't possibly be any comeback from it, can there? And if the earlier embellishments, you know, the supersonic speeds and the 80,000 feet, etc., etc., are anything to go by, I would strongly suspect this is another embellishment. Ross provides, as far as so far anyway, zero evidence to support this. Let's see where this goes.
That's crazy.
I know, it's amazing. And then I asked him about things like Roswell, Aztec, and other alleged crashes or discoveries of recovered non-human technology. Notice I didn't say alien.
Yeah.
And he told me that he never directly
Did he say non-human technology? Notice I didn't say alien. God, really?
saw these craft, but that he was briefed about it because he was the head, essentially, of research and development for the US Navy.
Yeah.
You got to wonder why would the head of research and development for the Navy be given a spacecraft portfolio? You know, why not give it to NASA? This doesn't make any sense, does it?
He, though, introduced me to people, and I was then introduced to other people who told me about what's called the program. Now, I'm not definitive about this, Spanian, because I haven't seen those craft.
Of course.
And until I see it with my eyeballs and verify, yes, that is a technology that is not human, it's not of this world, I really won't believe it, because
Finally, a bit of investigative journalism. Well, I'd be with you there, Mr. Coulthart. I wouldn't believe it either until I saw it myself.
there is always the risk that I'm being fed what's called disinformation.
Oh, yeah.
That
there's always the risk too that he's putting this disinformation, as he likes to call it, out there himself, just to spice it up a bit, because if he comes on here and says, well, there's nothing to it, he's been told there's nothing to it, there's a crash retrieval program but they've never recovered anything, he's not going to sell many books, is he? But if he comes on here and he puts a bit of intrigue into the story like he's doing here, then he's got a reasonable chance of flogging a few books.
the US is trying to feed information to me as a credible journalist to try and put the Russians off or put the Chinese off from screwing with them. So there's always that possibility. But I think the reason why
And that sort of raises a question itself, doesn't it, really? I mean, the Americans, the Chinese and the Russians really don't like each other. If the Russians had retrieved ET technology, I'm sure they'd tell us all about it and say, look what we've got. Certainly if they'd recovered an ET technology and they'd back-engineered it, they'd be doing a lot better than they're doing in Ukraine at the moment, wouldn't they? And China, again, they're going to say, we're banned from the ISS, we've had to put our own space station up. They're actually doing quite well as well, the Chinese, aren't they? They're doing a lot of stuff with their space program. We've got one of these and you haven't, so you plicks. That doesn't happen, does it?
plausible explanation for why this has been kept secret is that the US has had this technology for many, many years, possibly since World War II. And they've been trying to back-engineer it. And there's only a few people in the military who actually know that the US military has possession of it. And in fact...
Well, if they were seriously trying to do this, I mean, the world's top physicists would be involved in it. And as soon as you get a bunch of the world's top physicists involved in something, the project is going to be leaking like a sieve, isn't it? Think of the Manhattan Project. All that information was going straight back to Moscow. yeah, this is nonsense. And the other thing too is, why would ET not reveal themselves? Why don't they just land on the White House lawn? We wouldn't be able to hold them. Their technology would prevent us from harming them. They could say, hey, here we are. Why do the ETs keep themselves a secret? Why are they just stories and fuzzy pictures? If this was really happening, why don't we see something like a scene out of Independence Day? You get big spacecraft, unambiguous, obviously interstellar spacecraft flying across a city, up the Thames. Why not? If they're here, they've come all this way. Why just abduct Bubba, in Bravo Foxtrot, USA? It doesn't make any sense.
In fact, it's hidden, I believe, in private aerospace, inside a private company. Because that's the way you do it. You're trying to avoid the freedom of information laws. You're trying to avoid oversight by Congress. And so in the...
That does make sense, strangely enough, because, private companies, if it was, I don't know, who would it be? General Dynamics, maybe? Lockheed, British Aerospace Systems, those sort of companies, big defence contractors. In fact, the British government actually hires BAE Systems to look into interesting UFO stuff. Not recovered material, but just investigate it, try and find out what it is. They don't do it themselves anymore. So, Freedom of Information Act doesn't apply to private companies, so it makes sense to do that.
Last week there was a hearing before the...
So hide it in a private company, like a private property place.
Yeah, so instead of, for example, keeping it in the Defence Department here in Canberra, in a shed, you give it to BHP and say...
Put in a bunker underground.
They wouldn't give it to BHP, bloody BHP's a mining company. You give it to BAE Systems. They run the over-the-horizon radars at Alice Springs and there's a couple of the others. Where are they? I can't remember now, but they'd be doing a lot of work at Woomera, which is the largest military test range on the face of the earth, in the Northern Territory, I think it is, or in South Australia, I can't remember which. They're not going to be giving it to BHP. I mean, good grief. I mean, you could really hide an alien spacecraft at Woomera. The site is just so large. This Coulthart guy seems clueless to me. He claims to have spent years investigating this, but seems to know nothing about it.
Yeah, we want you guys to back engineer this, and it gives us...
We wouldn't be asking BHP, a mining company, to back engineer an alien spacecraft. That is beyond ludicrous. Beyond ludicrous.
Plausible deniability, because we can say it's nothing in the Defence Department.
Yeah.
Now that's what I'm told is going on. And it's very interesting, because I always laughed when people talked to me about alien spacecraft, or even worse, alien bodies being recovered. I always thought, oh, this is crazy. But then the former head of the Pentagon program, Lou Elizondo, he's gone public.
Yeah.
He went on TV in America and he's spoken to me about it. He says that the US, he believes, has recovered technology that is not human.
Yeah.
He believes. Lou Elizondo believes the US has recovered technology that is not human. This is the man that was running the UFO investigation program. He believes. He doesn't know. He didn't say to him, Ross, I know as fact that we have this material. Here's some pictures of it. Here's a piece that I took with me when I left. This is a windscreen wiper off a flying saucer. Get it analysed, and you'll find it's a really, really interesting, super exotic, low mass, synthetic material that's unheard of on Earth. No one would have ever seen it. That's not what he says. He says that this guy believes. I think that tells us that there's nothing to this. There's no tangible evidence to support any of this at all.
I'll say that again. The United States government has been accused by one of its own employees of hiding the fact that it has recovered alien technology.
Mental.
It's mental.
Yeah.
There's barely a day goes by without me shaking my head at the awesomeness of what that portends, what that means. But then he said it, and then a whole...
Said he believes. Not he knows, Ross. Wakey, wakey.
A lot of other people have said it. So there's a scientist who has a security clearance as long as you're in my arm. You know, he's allowed to know all the secrets. His name's Eric Davis, Dr. Eric Davis. He works for a federally funded research development corporation called Aerospace Corporation, and he claims to have become aware of spacecraft back engineering.
Yeah, again, Eric Davis, you know, he's backpedaling, isn't he, with regard this Admiral Wilson letter and all this sort of stuff. This is all dodgy stuff. It's got zero credibility, any of this.
Back engineering efforts.
Yeah.
He claims that there's been a decades-long effort going on inside the US government to secretly try and develop this technology. And this is where the explanation for me happens. I want to make this point.
Yeah, it's always in the US, notice, as well. You know, it's never we've heard the Russians have got one of these, you know. MI6 has told us that the Russians have recovered an alien spacecraft or anything like that. It's always in the US, you know. The US has got this, and they've been doing this. And Eric Davis was involved with those Admiral Wilson letters. Admiral Wilson denied it all. There was no evidence that this conversation supposedly ever happened. Well, Admiral Wilson said that he knew nothing about this UFO program. It's all nonsense.
If you're the US or any country in the world, right now we are in probably the most dangerous period in our history. Like when I was a boy, I didn't expect to live beyond 18. I really thought I was such a bleak little bugger. I was listening to punks and...
Yeah, but I mean in Australia, really? I was in London during that period. And I didn't give it a second thought.
Stiff little finger and thinking I was going to die because Ronald Reagan was president, Margaret Thatcher was the Prime Minister in the UK. I just thought it was inevitable we were going to have a nuclear war.
Yeah.
And the end of the Cold War in 1989 was the happiest moment of my life, and I was privileged as a journalist to be able to cover it.
Yeah.
And we are such...
covered as a journalist.
Yeah, the fall of the Berlin Wall and all of that. It was amazing. Man. It was such a privileged thing to be able to do. But the thing that really amazes me is for much of the last few decades, we've been quite complacent. We've been unaware of the dangers. We still have nuclear weapons sitting in bunkers under the ground. And the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, which is a group of concerned scientists who monitor how dangerous the world is, they say that right now is the most dangerous time in world history.
These people that...
Well, it probably is, because Putin is being painted into a corner, isn't he? I suppose the big question really is, would Putin prefer to be embarrassed or vaporised? Because, I mean, if he launches an attack, a nuclear attack, then that's going to be it. Russia will be completely obliterated. As will probably the UK. I don't know how Australia might fare, but it's certainly a dangerous time. I'd agree with that.
They give that score or that clock or
the doomsday clock.
Doomsday clock, and they say that we're at like if midnight is.
We're about 4 minutes to midnight.
Bro, like I'm getting goosebumps now. Like what he's saying there is like these are the people whose job is to analyse the state of world politics and the danger it presents to us, who represent it as a clock, the doomsday clock they call it, funny or whatever. And when it gets to midnight, that's doomsday, like we're all dead.
Yeah,
and it's
Third World War. Yeah.
Third World War, and it is at 11:56, and they're not joking about this.
So my theory is, and this isn't just my theory, this is people that I talk to in the US military and intelligence services. My theory is that the secret is being kept because the US is trying to develop this technology so that it can develop it as a military weapon.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a worry.
A power thing.
Yeah, because the Russians and the Chinese are apparently trying to do the same thing. Because there are allegations that the Russians have also recovered technology.
Yeah, and it's all science fiction stories. I mean, if anyone had this technology, the first thing they do is tell everybody they got it. If any of you have seen the movie Dr. Strangelove, it's all about the Russians building a doomsday weapon, so that if an atomic weapon is detonated on Russian soil, the doomsday weapon will be detonated and it will destroy the planet. And they're in the war room and they're having a chat about it, and the president says to the Russian ambassador tells him about this doomsday weapon. It's going to put a doomsday shroud around the planet as soon as one atomic weapon is detonated on Russian property. And the American president says to him, what's the point of having a deterrent like this if you don't tell anyone about it? And the Russian ambassador says, we were going to announce it in a month's time at some sort of convention. But you can bet your bottom dollar if anyone had this technology, they'd tell you. For this reason, no one would dare attack them with that kind of technology.
And so have the Chinese.
It'd be game over.
And so there's this proxy.
You're going down this whole.
I know.
So there's this what we see, like the new version of the space race,
Yep.
a reverse engineering race, and the first. Who knows what power comes with? It's unthinkable the power that would come with reverse engineering this stuff.
But the stuff that blows my mind,
You would rule the world.
is up until a year or two.
He's right. You would. You'd rule the world. You announce that. You're in charge. You're the boss. He's absolutely right.
Ago, this was all fantasy.
Yeah.
This was all rubbish. Nobody was saying this on the record. And the official position of the Obama White House of 2011 was, we don't have possession of recovered technology. We're not in contact.
Yeah, but it's still the position of the White House. Every president says the same thing. Trump says he doesn't even believe in aliens, and he would be in a position to know if they've got any recovered technology, wouldn't he? So if he's saying he doesn't particularly believe in aliens, then nobody's told him they've got any alien material, have they?
With aliens, there's no.
If you were saying this stuff on my podcast 8 years ago, you probably wouldn't have a job.
Yeah. Now, what's happened is there's a slow, careful, and I believe deliberate disclosure going on. So I think the US is deliberately bringing.
Yeah, this is what the UFO nuts have been saying for years about this, sort of trickle of information, this slow disclosure. But I mean, what would be the point of that exactly? If you got this stuff, why not just say so? Why disclose it? Why disclose it in dribs and drabs if it's real? Doesn't make any sense, does it?
People up to speed with the fact that, hey guys,
Everything's deliberate.
We've kind of been lying to you.
Yeah.
And I think the public is being prepared for major revelations. No.
You're 100% right. Like, nothing's at...
No, I don't think so. I mean, the Chinese have come forward only this week saying that they've picked up some interesting narrowband signals that could potentially be from an ET species. Straight away, as soon as they've discovered it, they're telling everybody, look how clever we are, look what we've got. Whether it turns out to be ET or not is another matter, but if they had any ET technology, you can bet your life they would be ramming it down the throats of the West. So would the Russians. We're not being prepared for any kind of disclosure. And these days, I mean, if there was a news bulletin, we've picked up an ET signal or an alien spacecraft landed in Canada, people would go, oh yeah, okay, then it'd go on to the football results and they'd forget about it. It's nonsense. Alright, I think this is going on for far too long, so I think we've got the gist of... I'll have a quick flick through it. If there's nothing else that's worth including, I'll say thanks for watching as always and maybe catch you again. If there's anything interesting, I'll tack it on.